Good night, and welcome to this brand new episode of Cut Deep. Tonight, our conversation is on policing and crime, and our guest tonight is none other than Police Commissioner Michael Mathews. I'm extremely excited to have him in the hot seat tonight. The concept of Cut Deep was developed with a focus on encouraging the wider public to think more in depth on issues that plague us, encouraging persons to have a voice and to use that voice to invoke change. Cut Deep is an interactive platform cutting through the noise and political rhetoric. It is raw, uncut, challenging you to think critically. What do the issues mean for us? What part do we play? It is a platform that will move the Virgin Islands toward unified, integrated success. I am Cindy Roseanne Jones, your host. We will take a quick break and come right back with the show for tonight.
The win! Oh!
What the hell?
I'm freaking out!
Is time. 284 News.
Coming to you live and direct from the beautiful British Virgin Islands.
What's poppin', what's really good, what's happening, what's up?
Davis has won it for the Lakers!
Welcome back to episode 5 of Cut Deep. Before we go any further, I would like to acknowledge Blossoms Florists for continuing to keep my set beautiful with gorgeous floral bouquets. Blossoms Florist is located in the Cutlass Building on Waterfront Drive and is available for all your floral needs. They can be contacted on 284-494-3906 or follow them on Facebook at Blossoms Florist. My gorgeous hair and makeup credit goes to the awesome McKelly's Beauty Salon just around the corner in the Hewlett Building. McKelly's is a full-service beauty salon offering services from head to toe. They can be contacted on 284-441-7404 or follow them on Facebook and Instagram at McKelly's Beauty Salon. I thank both of these businesses for their support of Season 2 of Cut Deep. As mentioned before we went to the break, we are discussing policing and crime on tonight's show, and I am delighted to have the Commissioner of Police on the set of Cut Deep with me tonight. Commissioner Mathews, welcome to Cut Deep. I would like you to take a moment and just introduce yourself to our guests.
Well, Cindy, thank you, and good evening, everybody. I am Mick Mathews. I am the current Police Commissioner of the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force. And can I just say I agree with the beautiful flowers here, but I won't talk about my makeup or hairdo. I'll keep that to myself, who does that.
Wonderful. Before we start, I would like to congratulate you and the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force on your efforts that led to the drug seizure over the weekend. I listened to the press conference earlier today, and I was dumbfounded. Lost for words, really, and extremely sad at where we are as a territory right now. But I continue to hold hope for this territory for the sake of my children, my friends' children, and every other young person in this territory. So thank you for what happened over the weekend.
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Commissioner, you've been very open with your views and opinions, sometimes very flippant, but a very good articulator of your points. So I am glad to have you on the show and hope that you would carry that same level of deportment and character throughout this show tonight. I want to congratulate you on what some may argue is a successful tenure, given that over the past few years, it seems like there has not been significant rise in major crimes. Sometimes it's quiet and sometimes an uptick. However, as of recent, maybe the past year or so, we've seen a level of resurgence in crime. I want to base the interview tonight around that aspect, and we'll start with some soft questions.
Sure.
What were your successes throughout your tenure? What do you think your major accomplishments were?
Well, first of all, you talk about crime in general, and despite what people may feel and perceive, In reality, recorded crime is still going down in the territory compared to where it was 5 years ago. Now, I don't take the credit for that personally. That's about the efforts of all of the agencies here and the team with me. And of course, it's about the public engaging in the fight against crime as well. So I think that in itself is a success story. When I started in 2016, the sense I got was a lack of trust and confidence in policing, a lack of cooperation by the communities, and we needed to turn that around. We needed to say to people, we can't do this alone, we have to work together. We can't go forward doing things to communities, we must do things with communities. So I'm proud that we've made progress in that perspective, but we're still on a journey, Cindy. We've still got a way to go. And I'm not seeking to make excuses by saying this, but had I read the small print on the contract back in 2016 that said a couple of Category 5 hurricanes might come your way within a year, or, you know, COVID-19 in the more modern times now, these things have done damage to the territory. It's done damage to tourism, to businesses. People have had to get back on their feet, especially after 2017. And, you know, the RVIPF was no different. I understand that the public would expect us, and perhaps have a right to expect, that we should be back on our feet and responding immediately after the impact of something like that, because we're the first line, first emergency service. But the reality was we fell over as well.
Yeah.
And having to put the force back together has taken a while. But when I look back now, it's felt like a long journey. But, you know, this weekend's events show that we are capable of going out there, running covert operations, dealing with serious crime in the territory, and crime, as you said, that will impact on all of the children's future here unless we grip it.
Absolutely. Do you think you've achieved success with heinous and major crimes?
Well, major crime covers sort of the most serious end of the business, and it would be unfair of me to sit here and not accept the fact that we've had some spikes in the more serious end of the business. We've seen robberies involving firearms, we've seen shootings, and of course we've had 3 homicides, sadly, again this year. One only last Friday when Mr. Everton McMaster was gunned down in broad daylight. That doesn't rest easy with me, Cindy.
Yeah, that was absolutely shocking.
It is shocking, and I would understand the public's fear and concern about that situation. What I can say is that most of these homicides, especially the recent ones, have been what I would call targeted hits, targeted shootings. You know, the average law-abiding member of the public hopefully doesn't have to worry too much about that. This is, you know, feuding going on between criminals. My fear, of course, is that, you know, an innocent person could get caught up in that.
Yeah.
And of course, we saw that in 2017 when a young 11-year-old lost her life in the back of a car. And that one still sticks in my throat, that we haven't resolved it and brought anybody to justice. But I suppose the point is, Cindy, we can't be everything to everybody, and we can't do everything with the resources that we have. But what we have is a team of very hardworking, diligent, and I will say it openly, honest police officers. Despite what has happened in you know, the last 48 hours or so, my majority of my officers are hardworking, honest individuals, and I will stand by them for their efforts.
Okay. Policing, community policing was one of your mentors. Do you think that you've been successful in introducing community policing, seeing that it is one of the keys in fostering good relations and communication in order to be able to share information with the police?
I would honestly say, looking out at the communities today, that I'm disappointed, especially as I'm heading towards the end of my tenure, that we haven't delivered what my ambition looked like in terms of community policing. Now, there's a number of reasons for that, not least of which we do have resourcing issues in the territory at the moment, and that is perfectly understandable. The public service are all making sacrifices and having to take cuts, so I have to hold vacancies too. But it is certainly my ambition to leave a blueprint for how to take our initial thoughts and ideas forward. In all truth and honesty, I don't think we've been as successful as we should have been with community policing, but there have been moments, there's been wonderful moments where you can look at it and go, we really got that right. But I'm sure people listening and watching will say, We could show you plenty of moments where you got it wrong, Commissioner, and I accept that. But, you know, hopefully my successor will be able to continue in that vein because, as you rightly pointed out, it's a critical part of policing.
There are known community hotspots that seem to go unchallenged. I could say in the Eastern Districts because I'm from there, so I see a lot. Why do you think that is?
Well, I suppose this is down to perception again, because like you, I live in the East End District, and I perhaps have a different view of what you see. If something happens to somebody, an individual, that is their experience. For example, if you're stopped by a police officer driving your car and that officer is rude to you or flippant, your perception of the whole of the RVIPF will be based on that encounter. It'll be the police here are rude, they're unreliable, they're flippant, I've got no time for them. And so the same thing goes when people say to me, well, you know what, I never see police officers on patrol in Road Town or in the East End or whatever. And I sort of always respond to that by saying, well, look, you know, we could play games, we could stand, you know, uniformed police officers on the roundabouts just during rush hours of a morning or an evening, just so everybody sees us. And then everybody will feel better because they say, well, the police are about, we can see them. But in reality, that's not the best use of policing or police officers. Of course, there are things that we could do better. Of course, there's more coverage I would like to give. But, you know, we've got nearly 60 islands here to police, and not all of them are occupied, I accept. But 235 regular officers are available to me at the moment. We are below establishment. I'm hoping we will see increases going forward. But, you know, I have to put them where the priorities are at the moment. And generally, those priorities are where most crime concerns are.
Okay. While we're on community policing, there are a couple issues that are troubling for residents. The perceived harass from officers on small infractions like ticketing, the appearance of the overuse of tasing, and the perceived attack on our young men. Can you speak to each of these?
Of course I can.
See, I've talked about perception.
Yeah, and I'm really grateful you brought the subject up because it gives me the opportunity to give a view that people may relate to. First of all, the ticketing issue. It's a common thing, isn't it? You know, the bloggers are famous for saying, look, why don't you deal with serious crime and just stop ticketing and picking on motorists? It's cliche. I've heard it all around the world throughout my entire nearly 40-year career. The reality is that police officers do not pick and choose which offences to deal with. They are there to enforce the law, whether it's small or big. So, for example, when the government decided that it was appropriate to issue fixed penalty tickets for breaches of the curfew and not complying with the regulations like social distance and so forth, yes, that's not pleasant. That's not a great duty that the police have to do, but someone's got to do it. And if it's there to protect the communities, if that's the only way to get a message across of enforcement is to say we are serious about these rules and regulations and laws, then, you know, I'm not gonna criticise officers for ticketing. What I will say is that sometimes even I would accept that some of my officers could use more discretion.
Right.
And I do encourage it. And just because a ticket is available and just because it's a ticketable offence doesn't mean you have to give a ticket every time. But, you know, at the end of the day, it is down to the individual officer. It's not for me to dictate to individual officers how they administer the law. But, you know, we are there to enforce the laws of the territory. Now, with enforcement comes the use of force, and you've kind of touched on it. You mentioned taser. So let's just take this whole thing in context. So first of all, the average officer equipment that is issued to them for their protection and the protection of the public. So they have an extending baton, they have capsicum spray, they have handcuffs, they have taser, and some officers, specially trained officers, have the lethal option of a firearm. Now, that's a range of things that officers could use legally and lawfully to defend themselves or to effect an arrest with a non-compliant individual should they feel the need to do so. The law provides for that. And I often, when I hear noise about taser, I often think, yes, it's not a pleasant thing to have to do to a human being, but look at some of the other options here. Do we start beating somebody with a baton? Do we start putting pepper spray in people's face, chemicals up people's noses? You know, do we actually draw loaded guns on people and point to their heads? You know, this is not America. This is not the US. This is not how we do policing. This is a British policing model. Now, Taser is worldwide distributed to police forces, and it's been available and been used by the RVIPF since 2013. So I do find it interesting that we've had 2 incidents, and perhaps it's because it was in close proximity in terms of timing, perhaps because the community are suffering and are feeling under pressure with all of the COVID scenarios and the lockdowns. I don't know what it was, and perhaps the officers just didn't get it right.
Right.
But 2 incidents of Taser this year, out of 7 years of its use, 7+ years of its use in the territory, I don't see that as police brutality or a major issue. What I can tell you is that both of those incidents that were raised with me, they were thoroughly investigated, and the results of those investigations were given to the National Security Council, which is chaired by the Governor, and the Premier and Deputy Premier and Attorney General sit on that council. So they are well aware of the actions that the police took, and in both cases we also put both officers back on retraining of the use of Taser, just to make sure that it was only ever used as a last resort. But ultimately, Cindy, I say this, and I say this to any member of the public that's listening to my explanation who doesn't agree with me. Police officers are not punch bags.
Yeah.
They are not there to be assaulted, and my officers get assaulted a lot. And so I have a responsibility to give them the equipment to protect themselves, protect others around them, and I hope and I pray that they will continue to use that wisely, effectively, but proportionately to the threat that they face at the time. I fully accept we won't always get it right, but I equally do not accept that a short social media clip tells the entire story.
Right. Well, of course, I moved back about 6 years ago, and I do find that there is hostility between the police and the public. I don't know from whence it came, but what do you think? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I suppose it's such a unique position, isn't it? You know, it was once said of police officers that they're ordinary people with extraordinary powers. And I think that's a good summary of the situation. You have power over other human beings. You have the ultimate power to take away somebody's liberty, to lock them up. And if that power is not used wisely, if it's not used fairly and transparently, it can create resentment. Nobody likes being told what to do. We're all human beings. I don't like being told what to do, but I can assure you Mrs. Mathews does a pretty good job of doing it in the home. The realities are that there are people who resent law enforcement, and maybe they have good reason to, maybe they have something to hide. But I would equally say this, I've had probably just as many compliments about the work of my officers over the years as I've had about complaints. So it's not everybody, and it's not on every occasion that somebody says, you know, I resent the way you're doing policing. But for sure, we've got a lot to learn still, and I think it goes back to your original point. If we can get a proper community policing model in place where we're working in partnership properly with our communities, I think then the communities will start to understand the role and responsibilities we have, the challenges that we face, and maybe work with us to avoid confrontational situations and avoid resentment. But I'll go back to the fact at the end of the day, human nature perhaps sometimes is nobody likes being told what to do, and certainly nobody likes to be told they're in the wrong.
Yeah. I don't know if sometimes maybe it's the way the police officers come off.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes there's a level of aggression. I grew up around police officers, very much so. I know most of the older, the senior officers in the force, because my dad, he was pretty close to a few of them, so they frequented our house. But I feel at that time there seemed to be a bit of really good community policing, like the police knew their communities, you know which police was in your community, how to talk to them, etc., etc. So maybe it's something to revisit, the whole community policing and, like you said, the blueprint.
I couldn't agree more with you, and I had a really interesting conversation quite recently with my deputy. We were talking about young people today and how, you know, Alwyn's been a police officer 35 years, I've been one 39 years, and we were looking back, swinging the lamp, as it were, and saying, in our day, young people were perhaps different. And I think that is true, that I think young people are more confident today, they're more prepared to stand up for what they think is right. I think these are positive things. But also, we have to then recognise that that is the pool that we're recruiting from now. And it's a different culture, it's a different type of outlook to life to what it was years and years ago when, like yourself, I remember the community policing styles of those days. That doesn't mean that you throw baby out with the bathwater here.
Right.
There are things that we can learn from the past. But I also think we've got to adapt to the fact that society today, especially younger people, they view the world through a completely different lens to perhaps I do. And we've got to perhaps recognise that and adapt accordingly.
Exactly. I guess since we're moving on and they're moving up,
Yes.
they're getting rid of us. Yeah. So, and that brings me, I guess, around to the issue of trust between the police force and the community, especially given the new developments over the weekend and the issue, I think, just about maybe 6 years ago, just 7 years ago, again, with police officers that were caught up in a drug case,
Yes.
Which I think is still ongoing.
Yes, correct. Yes. Due to have a retrial in 2021.
Okay. So I guess there are years and years of community speculation, and this is a small community. So often where there's smoke, there's fire. Where do you come down on this?
I don't underestimate at all the impact that it has on a community when they are faced with the prospect of corruption within law enforcement. It must be devastating. It was certainly devastating for me, I can assure you, when I realised that we had a problem in the force. And of course, I won't go into specific details, but of course I became aware that we had a problem a lot earlier than last Friday.
Right.
And we've been doing a lot of work internally to try and work out what was going on and how to deal with what we suspected. Now, I stress everybody is innocent until proven guilty by a court of law. And as you said, we've got outstanding matters before the court, and there is a current serving officer before the court this afternoon as a result of this weekend's activities. And I fully accept, as I say, that this will have damaged our reputation and this will damage confidence in policing. But I put a plea out to the public, and it's a simple one, is please do not assume that one bad apple actually sets the whole basket to go rotten, because that couldn't be further from the truth. The officers that have worked on this particular case and went out and put their lives at risk in the hours of darkness with little support on the ground to try and put a stop to this behaviour, this alleged behaviour, they are decent people with high integrity, high values, who want to protect the community. And I know that they have all taken this personally. The vast majority of my team are devastated that once again we're finding ourselves looking at ourselves and saying, wow, one of our own is in court. So we have to address that. And going forward, one of the things I've done, I mentioned it earlier today, one of the things I've done is I've put a proposal together as part of a interim strategic plan between the changeover of commissioners next year, that we have a revisit to what our internal professional standards capability looks like. I think, despite the noise out there about bringing people in from the outside, I think we do need external assistance with some of these things. I think we need expertise and experience around that. And I for one, I'm not saying let's bring loads of people in there and leave them here indefinitely, but I am saying let's take that experience where it doesn't exist locally, let's bring it in, and let's help us to put this thing right.
Yeah.
Because we will fail as a policing organisation, and we will fail this community if we don't address this. And I can't just sit idly by. It doesn't matter I've got 6 months left to do. It'd be very easy to say, oh, well, leave it to the next guy.
Right.
I can't just sit by and do that. I've got to do something in the meantime to try and maintain or indeed restore public confidence.
Absolutely. Like I said earlier, I looked at the press conference and I could not, so I don't even feel like there is corruption just with the police. because for me, at that level, that quantity,
Yeah.
that street value, I can't help but feel that the corruption goes so deep and so high, and you don't have to answer. That's just my view
Sure.
as a citizen, because I was shocked.
I absolutely understand that.
Yeah, you live here, you hear things, you see little things, but that is, if you'd excuse me, a hell of a thing that we had to listen to. And I know a lot of citizens and residents are just shocked.
When I took the phone call Friday evening, at what they discovered, I actually thought that my hearing was finally giving up. You know, I've reached that age because I couldn't believe my ears, and I actually questioned it. I said, you know, repeat that again. Are you sure that's the amount? And my heart sank because, Cindy, for the life of me, if somebody has felt comfortable to move that scale of illegal substances within our territory, then they haven't done it without help.
Of course.
It's as simple as that.
Of course, and it's very
I'm not,
worrying.
I'm not going to speculate. What I will say is, you know, it's very much a live investigation, this one, and we will continue to pursue all avenues. And, you know, if that ends up a wider dragnet that brings in more people into custody, answer questions about this, then so be it. You know, I remain impartial.
And you're willing to do whatever it takes to secure the community.
We have to. We have to.
I support you in that endeavor. I love a man in uniform. And I've talked about specifically police officers because I came up around police officers. And so I'm pretty comfortable around police officers. However, I think the image and appearance, it's evolving all the time, and everybody isn't comfortable when they see an officer. Their hairs probably stand up, you know what I mean? A couple of challenges, I think, include abrasive and over-aggressive attitude with the public, their lack of care in traversing with their big guns in community spaces, such as supermarkets. I don't know if you've had those complaints come into you. What can be done about this?
That's a really interesting point. That hasn't been raised with me before, but that's an interesting point. When we have a crisis, let's go back to post Hurricane Irma and Maria in September 2017. When I sat in meetings with cabinet members, with the governor, with other senior police officers and other senior law enforcement officers, one of the things they were encouraging me to do was to put as many visible firearms on the street. You know, can you get your officers out there, get the guns out, let the public feel safe? And I reacted quite strangely to that proposition because I come from a policing background in the UK where we're not routinely armed. We do things without the use of a firearm in the main. So I was a bit puzzled, and I kind of thought, wow, you know, in the Caribbean, people feel reassured if they see police officers with guns. This is worse than I thought. And so, you know, part of my ambition has always been around saying, you know, I'm not going to continually expand firearms in the force. You know, you make it proportionate to what the threat looks like. Even some of my own officers back then would say to me, you know, Commissioner, you've got to give us all guns. It's dangerous out there. But actually, you know, we are still, as the Governor pointed out today, one of the safest places in the Caribbean. So we've tried to, as I say, reach a position where a proportion of our officers are routinely armed, highly trained. We maintain that training, and we try to give them the most up-to-date equipment and weaponry. But it's an interesting point that in doing so, we want them to be comfortable with the kit. You know, it's a lethal piece of kit. They've got to look after it properly. They've got to know how to handle it. And getting comfortable with it is fine, but what I don't want them to do is getting blasé with it. And you know, if you've just pointed out to me, you know, actually some of your officers need to think about this when they stroll through a supermarket, I'm like, wow. Because actually, I'm going to take that away tonight, and I'm going to be talking to my armed teams about the fact that if you're going in a supermarket to get your lunch, the weapons stay locked up. You don't need to be displaying those weapons, you know. Yes, if there's a need to show weapons because there's a particular threat, then, you know,
and I think the public
will
accept
that.
But when you're in right way and one of the officers just traversing with their big gun to pick up groceries, and you're like,
Well, as I say, that one has caught me, and you get a few points for that one. That's caught me, but I absolutely take that on the chin. I take the point, and I apologise to the public if we've been doing that. Our function is not to put fear in the communities.
Yeah.
Our function is to put fear in the criminal community. But of course, 99% of the people in the BVI are law-abiding, decent folk, and we don't want to be upsetting those.
Absolutely. There are a large number, I'd say it's a large number for a small place, of unsolved heinous crimes in the BVI.
Yeah.
One of those is my very good friend, Kendoy.
Right,
That
okay.
I still can't get over that. But why do you think that is, and what can we do to address the matter? Like, how can we begin to unravel?
Well, I think obviously what we're talking about here, the most serious end of the business, which is homicide. And first of all, I always want to make sure people understand my feelings on this, and that is that, first of all, I still continue to extend my deepest sympathies to family, friends. Of course, the victims cannot be here to answer for themselves, but my job is to try and get justice for those victims, for those families, for those friends. And I've maintained throughout my tenure that we will not forget the victims of homicide in this territory. Now, I always try and quote a figure that people can relate to, and I appreciate that there will be others that I don't include in this. But going back to the 1st of January 2000, right up to today's date, there have been 70 homicides in the territory, 70. Sadly, the vast majority via the use of illegal firearms, which is one of the drivers to the problem. And we have arrested and charged in over half of those cases. But that tells you that there's nearly half of those cases are undetected at the moment, which means no justice for those families, no justice for those victims. And sadly, Cindy, means that killers are still walking amongst us, because we're not talking in every case where somebody has left the territory. Yes, we can certainly evidence that there are persons living outside the BVI now who we know have committed murder here. Last year, we managed to get one back in the territory and charged with a historic murder. That was the Nicholas Smith murder that took place in January of 2016. And we were able last year to finally track down that individual, because they got themselves arrested in the US, and get them back in the BVI and arrest them here. And that individual will now face trial on suspicion of that murder. But it's a slow process. And in the time I've been Commissioner, I've been fortunate to get the support of government to bring in additional homicide detectives. But it's not been enough. And we've got to do more. And modern technology that's out there today does allow us to apply modern techniques today to homicides and crime scenes that happened years ago. And that's what we've got to get into. We call it cold case reviewing, but we've got to do more of it. We've been doing some of it, but we've got to do a lot more of it. And my ambition and my driver is that we need to continue to look outside to where we can get that expertise and support. But at the same time, we can't fail the people of the BVI. And I include my own officers in that, because it's been pointed out to me by the Police Welfare Association, and indeed by the Premier himself, who takes a close interest in these matters. Some of my officers feel that by bringing people in from the outside, they're losing an opportunity to develop themselves, to have opportunities to move forward with their careers and so forth. So I have to strike a balance. So going forward, my ambitions would be, and I hope this will come to fruition in 2021, we'll be able to do more cold case reviews. We'll be able to look more at those historic murders, but also be able to train up and develop more local officers to continue that trend. We can't bring those people back, but we can try and do justice for them. The other big challenge, of course, Cindy, is going forward, looking in the other direction, is how do we push the homicide rate down? I don't believe there's anything such thing as a zero rate.
Right.
In 2019 we had 2 homicides in the territory, sadly. We've now had 3 this year, and we're still not out of the woods yet. We've got another month or so to go. And of course, it is the proliferation of illegal firearms in the territory that is causing the problems. But again, in the last few weeks, we've seized, just in a space of about 5 weeks, about 7 loaded weapons in possession of people who've all been arrested and charged with offences. And that tells me all I need to know. That's not necessarily all about successful policing. That might just tell you how many of them guns are out there and how much more work we've got to do.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to take a short break and come right back.
Right now, many people are trapped in their homes with an abuser. This is the shadow pandemic. In one weekend, calls to domestic abuse helplines in the UK went up by 65%. In the US, Asia, and pretty much everywhere, reported numbers are rising. These aren't just numbers, they're people you might know. If you think someone is in trouble, check in on them. Ask them if they're okay and if everything at home is okay. Educate yourself about domestic violence. Know the details of local services like helpline numbers or shelters. If she tells you or you suspect that her life or the lives of her children are in immediate danger, call the protection units or the police. The shadow pandemic is spreading right now. Let's help each other safely right now.
Welcome back to Season 2, Episode 5 of Cut Deep. The Commissioner of Police has joined me here tonight, and I'm so happy that he's here. We're going to continue this conversation so that we can get as much as we can into this 1-hour show tonight. Commissioner, again, thank you for being here. We went on a short break, but I want to ask you quickly, would CCTV cameras
Yes.
assist with the murder rate that's going on right now?
Is absolutely critical to crime fighting in this territory, Cindy, and I'm extremely frustrated. September 2017, we lost the CCTV cameras in this territory, and here we are in November 2020, and I'm still waiting for them to be replaced. Yes, they've been procured. Yes, there's contract issues. Yes, there's been funding issues. And I'm sorry, it frustrates me that that is a principal security requirement for the people of this territory.
Correct.
And they're entitled to that level of additional protection. And it's not there yet.
Yeah.
And it needs to be sorted.
Yeah.
And I know it's moving forward, and I'm told the latest dates for the rollout is going to be early in the new year. So, you know, maybe 2021, my dreams will come true. Probably after I've retired as Commissioner, but it's a very frustrating situation.
And that, you know, things like that is what really gets me going, that gets me angry, because to me, those things are priority.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
you know, we find money to fling around for all sorts of things, you know, but our safety, children's education, those are not priorities. So those are the things that really get me going. But I'm not going to go there tonight. We're just going to keep it calm.
Well, what I will say to you, just to really nail the point for you, is that in the last few weeks, you kind of alluded to it earlier on, we've had a number of violent crime incidents. We've seen people opening fire with weapons in the street, not necessarily hitting anybody, but just opening fire and that. In all of the locations bar one where these incidents have occurred over the last few weeks, they all used to have CCTV cameras covering it. And criminals, I'm afraid, always commit crime, even in front of live cameras.
Right.
So we are missing opportunities all the time, and it frustrates me because the public are entitled to that level of protection, as I say.
Yeah, I think at this moment, the public feels under siege.
I can
with
understand
crime.
that.
And
I can
so
understand
I
that.
think the government definitely needs to make it a budgeting priority for us to get our CCTV cameras back in place.
Well, you know, government are obviously charged with the responsibility of managing a budget as best they can, and I'm sure there are many, many challenges to that, and COVID will not have helped with income to the government this year. I absolutely understand that. But, you know, this is not just about the here and now government and what decisions they've made. This goes all the way back to 2017, and I just fail to understand why we are in this situation that we're in now, with no coverage. And the criminals know there's no coverage.
Yeah, of course.
And what's the point in hiding that anymore, you know? I'm told that, as I say, that this is going to happen sooner rather than later. You know, I'll be the first to be shouting it from the rooftops when it finally appears.
Okay. Commissioner, I want to congratulate you on the successful academies that were put on during your tenure and the growth of personnel that has resulted from those. Let's talk about strategies on bringing Virgin Islanders into the force. What progress has been made on that front in terms of hiring and promoting Virgin Islanders in the force? You've touched on it a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you can.
Well, I am a big supporter of having local people police local communities. It doesn't come without its challenges, and certainly if you talk to any of the BV Islanders that I employ in the police, they will all say to you that it is challenging sometimes when it's your cousin or your brother that's
Right.
getting dealt with, and they're there at the same time.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that BV Islanders should be excluded from
Right.
anything within policing. Now, I was surprised when I came here in 2016 that the low numbers that were reflected in the force compared to other nationalities. But of course, the job of the Commissioner is to make sure that the police force reflects the communities it serves.
Right.
And of course, of the 33,000 people in the British Virgin Islands, I think at the last count, 12,000 are BV Islanders. So we have to have a mix. We can't just have 100% BV Islanders, because I have a responsibility for all those other nationalities. And you don't want to hear that. I know some of you out there, but that's the truth. That's my responsibility.
Yeah.
But, we've been working to try and make the RVIPF an attractive proposition for local people, for BV Islanders. And in the last 3 years, we've taken just around 80 new recruits in over a period of time. Now, we've lost a lot of people to retirements in that time as well, so we haven't seen sort of exponential growth overnight. But the good news has been that certainly in the last couple of those intakes, we've had high numbers of BV Islanders, people, Indigenous people, stepping forward and joining up. And I'm delighted with that, because that means that there is still confidence amongst Indigenous people that this is a career that their children can take on. At the moment, we're about 25% of the force BV Islanders, I suppose, at the moment. And they're in different ranks. I was delighted that, one of my
Has that number gone up or down over the years?
It's gone up. Yeah,
Okay.
it's gone up. Yeah, during the time that I've been here, I've been pleased to see the success of some individuals. We have one of our most senior officers is a female officer. She's a BV Islander, first female officer to achieve that status. Last year, we promoted another BV Islander to the rank of Chief Inspector, which is middle management, and so the story goes on. And I encourage BV Islanders to continue to look at the force as a career option, because we will be recruiting again in the new year. And I also seek to reach out and still give encouragement to my own officers, who I know it sometimes falls on deaf ears, but the one thing I do believe in, Cindy, is that you've got to have integrity in any process.
Right.
And when it comes to processes where you're saying you're going to have to compete for a promotion, for example, that process has got to have integrity. And that means that everyone that goes for it has to go through the same test.
Right.
I don't believe, for example, that it would be right of me to say to the force, well, if you're a BV Islander, you can skip that bit and just have to do this bit.
Right.
But what I will do, and what I am prepared to do, and what I've tried to do, is encourage, mentor and support BV Islanders, because it's the BV Islanders working in the force today that are going to be putting the messaging out there to those who might be considering it as a career.
Right.
And they're the ones I really want to be doing the encouraging. It's no good the white boy from the UK doing it. They're not going to listen to me. But
Totally.
But that's the work I've got to do. And I probably had mixed success with that. Some of my staff are probably pleased with what's happened in terms of local people in the force. Others will probably say I haven't done enough, but we certainly have tried.
Okay. What are the key capacity gaps within the force? Like the real critical ones?
At the moment, we are struggling in some of our specialist areas. And I'll give you a little example that earlier this year, the government introduced new legislation, cybercrime legislation. Now, very much needed legislation. I've read the legislation from back to front. It's very powerful legislation, and it addresses a number of issues. One small problem is that we do not have the skill set at a high level in the force to deal with it. So when somebody comes along and says, internet fraud, or somebody has been impersonating me, and doing this using electronic means, we often have to go and then find assistance from outside to come into the force, sometimes at high cost, just to help us investigate those kind of things. So it's specialisms like that that we're having to change our thinking about. And we've got to build that new capability over a period of time.
Right.
And I do agree with the Premier and the current government that, you know, in building, putting those building blocks in place, we should be targeting local business, local skilled people. And, you know, this might be unheard of here in the Caribbean, but maybe not everybody needs to be a sworn police officer who comes in and does crime fighting.
Right.
For example, we know we've got some excellent IT skills in the territory outside
Absolutely.
the police force. How about we actually start employing some of those people as IT experts to fight crime, to investigate crime? They don't necessarily have to be warranted officers and go out in a uniform like this and appease you, you know, with the uniform. They can be people that just bring a technical skill.
Absolutely.
So again, you know, maybe that's what the future will look like for the territory.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can relate to that. You talked about leaving a blueprint for your successor.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because on day one, my successor could turn around and go, thanks very much, we're going in a different direction. And I
True.
respect that. I have no idea who my successor will be. I, for obvious reasons, have had absolutely nothing to do with the process to select. That is a matter for the Police Service Commission. And
Okay.
I have had people make inquiries of me who may be interested, sort of rung me up or emailed me and said, can you tell us what it's like to be the commissioner there? And obviously I've not told the truth because you wouldn't get anyone to come here, would you? You know, I'm joking, Cindy. You know, I've done my bit to encourage as many people as possible, both local and outside the territory, to show an interest.
Yeah.
And I hope that, you know, the individual who's selected, he or she, I hope, will come along. And firstly, I hope that they will inherit a slightly improved organisation on the one I inherited. And that's no disrespect to previous
course.
commissioners. You know, you just kind of build.
Of course.
And I hope that, you know, in leaving a blueprint of, you know, I called it an interim plan quite deliberately because I see it literally as a kind of 18-month thing. I hope it will give the next person the opportunity to settle in, get used to the BVI, understand the threats and risks here, and then start to determine what direction to take the force in next. But in the meantime, at least they've got a platform to build on.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a tricky question.
Ooh. Like the rest haven't been tricky.
Do you believe that there is the existing competence on the force to be able to fill the leadership gap to become the Commissioner of Police? We're not talking training or more exposure, but as it stands right now at this very moment within the force.
I've got some really talented senior officers in the force. But one of the problems that we do have is there is a rank structure. Policing is geared on a rank structure. And at the moment, we have a commissioner, a deputy commissioner and superintendents. And it will be the superintendent level who would be the most qualified to apply for either of the above positions. But the problem that we are facing at the moment is the deputy commissioner is still there, and thank goodness he is because he's an excellent deputy commissioner. But that means that any of my superintendents who may wish to apply have got to jump a rank if they're going to apply to be the commissioner. And that's a tough jump to make because the competition out there who will also be applying may well already be at that next rank up, at the deputy rank, ready to take the commissioner's position, or may even be a commissioner somewhere else that wants to come here. I mean, I was a commissioner in Cyprus before I came here. So, you know, it's a difficult one because I think I've got some really talented people in my organisation, and I most definitely see a future deputy or future commissioner as a BV Islander here in the future. Most definitely. No question of it. But I can't say it because it's not my decision.
That's true.
All I can do is encourage them to apply.
Correct, but right. So you feel that there is a commissioner that sits in your ranks right now?
I feel that we've got talent in our ranks. It wouldn't be for me to say if there's a commissioner there. That has to be the process that determines that.
Okay. Alrighty. What are the key impediments to doing your job?
Well, being an outsider, be it, you know, for a short period of time when you arrive here, you feel that sense of you're somebody from the outside, you're coming in, and that can become a key impediment very quickly if you don't handle that right. I was very fortunate, Cindy, because what I hadn't appreciated was exactly how welcoming the BVI was going to be and the local people were going to be. If we ignore all the noise and the small one or two bloggers who write Mathews go home every 5 minutes, stop defending your
Absolutely.
corrupt officers and all of that sort of stuff. If you get all of that out of the way and you dig down into it, most people want to help you settle in and they want to show you how things are on the BVI. But one of the biggest impediments then is that you will look at a scenario. I looked at the organisation very early on, and you realise that there are things happening that could be modernised, could be done better. But you've got to do it in a way, you can't impose it. You can't kind of go, hey, in the UK we do it like this, now we'll do it here like this. You've got to actually test your thinking out, and you've got to get people on board with you. And what that then means is it takes time. All of us could be autocrats and just walk in tomorrow and say, hey, as of Monday, we're doing this.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that's an effective way of managing, a police force.
Correct.
And so that has been the challenge. Bringing about change has been the challenge, because you have to deal with local culture, local tradition, the way it's always been done here. And you have to try and encourage and coach people into other options without necessarily imposing yourself.
So I see you read the blogs.
Yes, okay. Well, my wife tells me to stop reading them these days, but I used to read them all the time when I first got here, because in my first few weeks I thought, my God, how have I upset so many people just by arriving in the territory? But you learn quickly. I once
Absolutely.
I once said this on a radio show back before the hurricanes, but I think it was 2017. I said at the time, the population, I think at the time, was about 34,000 people living here. And I'd counted one on an article one day that there were 10 negative comments about me. and I thought 10 out of 34,000, I don't think I'm going to lie awake at night worrying about.
Exactly. When I want a good chuckle or just to pass the time, I go read the blogs. And it's pretty hilarious.
Well, you actually make me look good sometimes, Cindy, don't you? They're having a go at you as well. So, we're in good company tonight.
Yeah. About 2 people are always having a go at me. I mean, they write about 20 or 25 posts, but you know how it goes. So let's talk about the role of the Commissioner of Police and how that role balances relationship with local government and Her Majesty's Governor. I think each entity wants to achieve the same thing for the BVI, but may have differing views and how to accomplish those. So how do you balance what the government of the day wants when it is at odds with what the governor, who is the head of security, wants?
Sure. First of all, it's a very, very fine balance. But of course, I'm impartial and operationally independent of all of those bodies. The governor would never dream of telling me how to police an operation in the territory, and I think the same would apply to the government. But you have to take account of both. Constitutionally, as you say, the governor, as it stands at the moment, as we sit here today, is responsible for security, and constitutionally I have to answer to him. But I can't just ignore the elected leadership of this territory. That would be wholly wrong, and would go against the democratic values that I hold dear. So National Security Council, obviously we are able to share views with the elected representatives and the governor. Also, I'm very often invited to give advice as well as take advice from Cabinet and the elected ministers. And I certainly do my best to try and deliver upon the things that they see as a priority as well. Recently, for example, we had some really useful and helpful steers from Minister Reimer around traffic issues, and especially after the rerouting of the traffic around Road Town, and some of the additional things that we could do to support his ambitions. And, the feedback from him has been very positive. So it is a fine balance. But I suppose the key to all of this, Cindy, is ultimately we must never allow the police to be politicised. We must never allow the UK to overreach and direct me accordingly. I've been selected and appointed and sworn to be independent on all of that. And that's what I try to do. I try to rise above it. I try to ignore the noise, if you like. And whilst there may be one or two people on both sides of this debate in politics or on the governor's side that might think that I don't do that very successfully, this is not about, I'm the governor's best buddy because I answer to him, or I'm the premier's best buddy because he's the elected leader. I'm the Commissioner of Police. I'm independent. I'm impartial. I'll try and do my job.
Yeah. We're going to wrap up with a couple more questions as time is running away from us, and I want to get these in. Would you say, are your biggest regrets during your tenure?
I would have liked to, we've touched on it already, I would have liked to have seen a more community-friendly, embedded model of policing by now. I've been prevented from doing that through a number of reasons, and that is a regret for me. And I do regret where people have lost their lives here and we haven't managed to capture people in time to bring them to justice, because I do feel for those victims of crime in particular and those families out there. But the one thing I absolutely don't regret, Cindy, is coming here.
Yeah.
I absolutely love the BVI and the people here, and I've got no regrets about taking the job.
Wonderful. Do you think, when you came, you were very popular. Do you think that has waned any?
Well, I'm not paid to be popular. You know, I had some nice compliments when I came here, but as I also said, I had a few bloggers wanting me to get on the next flight back as well. The other day, walking down on Main Street, I got stopped by an elderly lady, and we both had our masks on, and she said, "Are you the Commissioner of Police?" And I said, "Yes, I'm afraid I am." And she said, "You're doing a wonderful job, please don't go." And coming from a little elderly lady on the street, you know, we're uninvited, tells me all I need to know. There are people out there that will hate me for what I've done, and there are people that will love me for what I've done. Either way, I just hope I've done my best for the people of the BVI as a whole.
I could tell you that Virgin Islanders are very difficult people to please. So I wouldn't lose too much sleep over it.
I have some very good friends who are Virgin Islanders, I can assure you.
I'm a Virgin Islander, so I could say that. I know our DNA very well. So what's next for you? Are you just going to retire, go on to policing somewhere else?
I told my wife that I'd probably sleep for 6 months, and she has different ideas to that. I think probably we'll get back to the UK and probably reset and think about, you know, what's next. I'm not getting any younger, Cindy. I've just celebrated my 60th birthday in September, just gone. It's probably time to slow down. But I can't imagine me stopping work altogether. Yeah, maybe I'll get back in the classroom. That's something that I've always enjoyed, teaching. Maybe I can do something along the lines of teaching recruits or police officers, you know, based on my experience. I'm sure I'll do something.
Yeah. Would you want to come back here and just be...
BVI will always be a part of my life going forward. It'll always be in my heart. You know, it's such a unique place.
Okay. Fun question. Does the police have an annual quota on ticketing to achieve?
Yeah, I could say every year when we have a pay rise, but no, there's no quotas set whatsoever.
I just had to get that in. Commissioner Mathews, it was indeed a pleasure to have you on tonight's episode of Cut Deep. I want to thank you.
Thank you.
For all the years of service that you've given to the BVI community, and I wish you well in your future endeavors. And to my listening audience, thank you for tuning in with me each week and for giving me your support. I will see you next week.